It's no secret that the Nintendo Switch 2 costs quite a bit of money. Luckily, you will be able to save a little bit just by using your existing original Nintendo Switch accessories. Nintendo has a whole support page going through which Nintendo Switch accessories will and will not be compatible with Nintendo Switch 2. So first of all, if you want to play a video game system, you're obviously going to need video game controllers. So Nintendo's list shows all of the existing Switch controllers that will work with Switch 2. First off, we have the Joy-Con controllers. We know this one. According to Nintendo themselves, the Joy-Con controllers will be compatible with Switch 2. In the notes section here, it says, can be used by pairing wirelessly to Nintendo Switch 2, so you'll probably just have to go to that same controller setup screen. It also says, cannot be attached to Nintendo Switch 2. A Nintendo Switch console or compatible accessory such as a Joy-Con charging grip or Joy-Con charging stand two-way is required for charging. So I don't know if you guys remember this, but a while ago Nintendo just randomly released this new accessory for the Joy-Con called the Joy-Con charging stand two-way. They advertised it alongside Nintendo World Championships NES Edition as a way to easily charge your Nintendo Entertainment System Nintendo Switch Online controllers. However, in hindsight, they probably released that accessory in preparation for the Switch 2 so that people could still charge their original Joy-Con controllers. In fact, I did an unboxing video on this channel if you want to check that out. So anyway, yes, the Joy-Con controllers will work with the Switch 2, but you are going to have a way to charge them because they won't attach to the Switch 2 console itself. According to Nintendo, the Nintendo Switch Pro controller will also be compatible with the Switch 2. The notes here say, can be used by pairing wirelessly to Nintendo Switch 2, and can be charged by connecting it to the Nintendo Switch 2 dock via a USB cable. So basically, most, if not all, controllers that have a USB-C port on the top most likely will work with Nintendo Switch 2, and unlike the Joy-Con, since it does have that USB-C port, you won't have to get some separate way to charge it or anything. You can just plug it straight into the Switch 2 dock. Now, something to note with the Nintendo Switch Joy-Con and Pro controller is that you will not be able to wake up your Nintendo Switch 2 system using these controllers. And this is something that Nintendo just kind of secretly hid on their website. Like, out of all the pages, it's on the transfer guide page. At the very, very bottom, in like the smallest text possible, it says, you cannot exit sleep mode on Nintendo Switch 2 using the home button on Nintendo Switch controllers such as Joy-Con and Nintendo Switch Pro controller. I honestly don't know why that is the case, because ideally all of these controllers are just using Bluetooth. I don't know, probably someone smarter than me can explain this, but that's something important to remember. Like, unfortunately, you are going to have to physically turn on your Switch 2 instead of just using the home button. I know, first world problems. Nintendo also lists all of the Nintendo Switch Online Classic controllers that they've released, which were the NES controller, SNES controller, Nintendo 64 controller, and the Sega Genesis control pad. So for all of the controllers besides the NES controller, they're pretty much the same deal as the Nintendo Switch Pro controller. Since they have a USB-C port on the top, all you have to do is plug it directly into the Switch 2 dock. But with the NES controllers, similar to the Joy-Con, since the only way to charge it is to attach them to the Nintendo Switch system itself, you are going to have an accessory that charges these controllers like the Joy-Con charging stand two-way. What a weird name for an accessory, by the way. And also, all of these controllers have a little note here that says works with compatible games. So my best guess is that they're just putting that as a disclaimer. You can't use an SNES controller for a game like Super Mario Odyssey or something. But moving on from controllers to more miscellaneous accessories here, the adjustable charging stand for Nintendo Switch will not be compatible with Switch 2. The only note they have here is cannot be used with Nintendo Switch 2. So I don't know if you guys even remember this accessory. I remember they released it pretty early on in the Switch's lifespan, and it's basically meant to solve the issue with the original Nintendo Switch where if you play the Switch in tabletop mode, you can't charge it at the same time. So this is basically just a tiny little charger, and it has a little USB-C port on the bottom, so you just plug the Switch onto there. I'm kind of surprised that they're saying that this isn't going to be compatible with the Switch 2, because from what I understand, this is basically just a USB-C little stand/charger. My best guess is that maybe the dimensions of the Switch 2 do make it so that it can't fit onto this charging stand, but at the same time, they're saying that the Switch 2 is basically the same thickness as the original Switch, so I don't know what the issue is. Maybe it's like a power thing, I don't know. I'm curious to see if anyone will actually try using this charging stand with the Switch 2. In any case, the next accessory they have here is the original Nintendo Switch dock, which will not be compatible with the Switch 2. This one I feel is pretty self-explanatory. The only note they have here is the Nintendo Switch dock is not compatible with the Nintendo Switch 2. Basically, since the Switch 2 is more powerful than the original Switch, the dock also has to be more powerful in order to power the console. You also have a new fan built into the new Nintendo Switch 2 dock. I imagine maybe the connection points are different or something. So in any case, yeah, you won't be able to use your original Nintendo Switch dock with the Switch 2. I've seen some people asking if they can use their Switch 2 dock with the original Nintendo Switch, and we've since learned via Nintendo's Japanese website that you in fact cannot use the Switch 2 dock for the original Switch. Moving on to the Nintendo Switch AC adapter. Nintendo says that it is not compatible with Switch 2. According to the notes here, due to the differing power output, it is not possible to use Nintendo Switch 2 in TV mode using this adapter. So when you're plugging in your Nintendo Switch 2 dock, you will not be able to use the original Nintendo Switch power adapter. You're gonna have to use the one that is included with the Switch 2 system. However, they do add another note here that says it is possible to charge a Nintendo Switch 2 console when plugged in directly. If you want to use your Nintendo Switch AC adapter with the Switch 2 in handheld mode or tabletop mode, then you can actually use that to charge the console directly into its USB-C port. In really basic terms, you can use the Switch AC adapter as a charger, but not as a power source for the dock. Next up, we have the HDMI cable included with Nintendo Switch. Nintendo says that it is not compatible with Switch 2, which I find very interesting, but under the notes here they say, it is not compatible as the HDMI cable standards differ. In order to maximize the performance of Nintendo Switch 2, please use the HDMI cable included with Nintendo Switch 2. And it's very interesting to me because I imagine this is just a difference in like the sort of maximum resolution that each HDMI cable supports. The original Nintendo Switch HDMI cable is probably like HDMI 1.4 or something, while the Switch 2 probably comes with an HDMI 2.1 cable. However, I believe you can still use an HDMI 1.4 cable with HDMI 2.1 devices. It's just that the highest resolution that you can output at is going to be like 1080p 60. But I don't know, maybe there's like some other HDMI technology that's going on here that I don't understand. Once again, I'm interested to try out using a Nintendo Switch HDMI cable with the Switch 2. I would be very surprised if it doesn't work with at least 1080p. Next up, we have the micro SD cards, which are not compatible with Switch 2. Nintendo Switch 2 is designed exclusively for micro SD express cards, which allow for faster data transfer compared to the conventional micro SD card. It is only possible to use a micro SD card to view screenshots and videos captured on Nintendo Switch. So this is another one that I think is pretty self-explanatory. It just comes down to the fact that the Nintendo Switch 2 is more powerful than the original Switch. So you're going to need these faster micro SD cards to work with the Switch 2. Unfortunately, as of this recording, it is very hard to find any of these micro SD express cards because everybody and their mother is trying to buy it for the Switch 2. But anyway, the point being, you unfortunately will not be able to use like the micro SD card that you bought for your original Switch with the Switch 2. You're gonna have to buy a completely new one, being the micro SD express card. Next up, we have the Nintendo GameCube controller adapter. This was released with Super Smash Bros. Ultimate, and this one is going to be compatible with Switch 2. This accessory can be used in TV mode by connecting via a USB port on the Nintendo Switch 2 dock. So once again, pretty self-explanatory. You just plug in the GameCube controller adapter into the Switch 2 dock and it'll work with your GameCube controllers. I would imagine that means that you can use this with the GameCube Nintendo Switch Online app. I haven't seen that confirmed, but that would be my guess. And then finally, we have just like a bunch of plastic accessories for the Nintendo Switch. So we have the original Joy-Con strap, the Joy-Con grip, the Joy-Con charging grip, the Joy-Con wheel, the leg strap, and the Ring-Con from Ring Fit Adventure, the Joy-Con AA battery pack pair, which I feel like is another sort of deep cut accessory. I've actually unboxed this on my channel as well if you want to check it out, and the Joy-Con charging stand two-way. So for all of these, it's pretty obvious, since these accessories were made for the original Joy-Con, they physically won't fit on the Joy-Con 2 controllers. However, with all of these accessories here, you can still pop in your original Joy-Con controller and then connect those Joy-Con to the Switch 2. And then it goes back to the Joy-Con compatibility that we talked about earlier. So with the leg strap and Ring-Con in particular, you can still play Ring Fit Adventure on your Switch 2 and use these accessories with your original Joy-Con. And in fact, Ring Fit Adventure is one of the Nintendo Switch games confirmed to be fully backwards compatible with Switch 2. But those were all of the original Switch accessories that Nintendo has listed on their support page here. When it comes to third-party accessories being compatible with Switch 2, I imagine it's going to be a case-by-case basis. Most of these third-party controllers just use Bluetooth, so I would imagine a lot of the third-party controllers will be compatible with Switch 2 in some way. Some third-party accessory makers are already confirming that their controllers are compatible with Switch 2, so it just might depend on what accessory you're trying to use with your Switch 2. But let me know in the comments which original Switch accessories you guys will be keeping to use with your Switch 2. If you want to watch another one of my videos all about Switch 2, check out the video below. For now, thank you for watching this video, and thank you so much to all of our members. My name is Chase, and I will see you guys again soon. Bye.